Presidents went to Harvard like John F. Kennedy. I know about that.
Nowinski wins it.
Yes!
Here is your winner, Christopher Nowinski.
Because in the end, brains always wins out over brawn.
Hi, I'm Chris Nowinski, and welcome to the Nowinski Perspective for Smackdown Your Vote. This is part 2 of my discussion with Ken Mehlman, Chairman of the Republican Party, on the issues critical to 18 to 30-year-old Americans. Mr. Chairman, it's good to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
Let's jump right into the issues.
Sure.
We'll start with the economy. In 2005, the Bureau of Labor Statistics showed that real compensation was down, making it harder for the average American to make ends meet. What can we expect to hear from Republicans in 2006 on the economy and on good jobs for young Americans?
Well, Chris, economy is an incredibly important issue, and our economy is strong today. We've had months of strong economic growth. The unemployment rate is a 4.7% low. Inflation is low. Home ownership is an all-time high, but it's got to be stronger. One thing that young people understand, that younger Americans understand, is that we have now global competition for jobs. Whatever you do, whatever you make, wherever you make it, they can make it overseas if they want to. So how do we deal with that? We think you got to reduce taxes, you got to reduce regulation, and you got to reduce red tape. Because if there's high taxes in the United States and there are lower taxes abroad, the jobs are going to go overseas. The president's got a plan to make health care and energy more affordable. That's important to jobs and to job growth in our country. This country right now is home to only 5% of the population of the world, but to 1 out of 3 scientists and engineers in the world. And they're so important because they create new jobs. The president will double the federal investment in technology research, which produces things like the hearing aid, things like the internet, things that have been so important to job growth in our country. So we've clearly got to let families keep more, we've got to let employees earn more, and we've got to make the smart and right investments necessary for long-term job growth.
Let's talk about national security. Some pundits call the Iraq War the president's Vietnam. Most of the people serving in Iraq and Afghanistan are under 30 years old. Yeah. An increasing number of Americans are questioning the wisdom of keeping these young people in harm's way. What do the Republicans, how do they plan to attack this issue in 2006?
Well, the first thing I would say to anybody that's serving in Iraq, and WWE has been fantastic when it comes to this, is thank you. The men and women serving in Iraq and Afghanistan are keeping all of us safe and free, and we should thank them for their incredible, heroic sacrifice. Second of all, the analogy to Vietnam was one that was actually made by one of Osama bin Laden's deputies. He said America's going to pull out of Iraq just like we pulled out of Vietnam. But if you think about Vietnam, the Ho Chi Minh, the leader of Vietnam, he wasn't trying to take over a region of the world where there was serious terrorism, where there were serious challenges. That's what Osama bin Laden and his folks are trying to do. They've said their goal is to use Iraq as a central launching point for terrorist attacks against the West and for dominating the region. So we can't abandon Iraq because it would strengthen the terrorists. If you think about it, 9/11 wasn't the first attack on our country. For a generation, whether it was in 1972 with the Munich Olympic Games, in 1979 when our hostages were taken, in 1983 Marines in Beirut were attacked, in 1993 the World Trade Center was attacked, throughout the 1990s our embassies were bombed. Each time when we were attacked, we didn't realize we were at war. And the terrorists, when they attacked us and we didn't hit back, they said, you know what, these guys are weak, we can keep hitting them. If we abandon Iraq before there's victory, we're going to send a message to the enemy, to the terrorists, that the reward for their attacks is our surrender. It'd be the worst thing we could do. It would make us less safe. It would potentially cause more 9/11s in this country. So as hard as Iraq is, we've got to prevail. What do we do to prevail? There's several things. One, we continue training the Iraqi forces. We continue working with the reconstruction. There were 3 elections last year which were very important. And we continue to thank the men and women that are providing that important service. This is a very hard war, but the only thing worse would be sending the wrong signal to terrorists, because on 9/11 we learned what happens when over a generation you send the wrong signal to the enemy.
Let's move on to ethics. Now, ethics, or the lack thereof, was the talk of the political media in 2006. And while Democrats have been implicated, most of the people they talk about are Republican members of Congress. Can we expect to hear from Republican members of Congress in terms of the message and their actions in 2006 to address the issue of ethics?
I think what you'll hear from Republicans, and certainly what I've been saying, is this. Public service is more important than political party. I made some news a few weeks ago at a Republican National Committee meeting. I said if a Republican member of Congress or a Republican official is guilty of illegal or inappropriate behavior, they should pay the consequences. Even though I'm chairman of the Republican Party, first and foremost, I'm an American who's got to duty to uphold the public service, that's more important than my party. It was disappointing to me when Harry Reid said it's a Republican scandal, even though he did a lot of the same things that he accuses Republicans of doing. This shouldn't be about playing games or partisanship. Here's what I think we need to do. First, people who are guilty of wrongdoing need to be punished, need to suffer the consequences, need to deal with their actions, and we shouldn't care about their political party. Everyone ought to be held to the same standard. Second, I think Congress needs to pass reforms and lobbying to ensure there's full disclosure, the public knows what's going on. That's going to be very important. Third, I think very important, is dealing with earmarks and how Congress spends money. We need to reform that process to make sure they spend your money carefully. All of those are things we've got to do. And you know what the last and most important thing is? There's an old saying that says power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. One of the problems is there's too much power in Washington, D.C. There's too much money. There are too many decisions. That's why we got to cut taxes. That's why we get to put families, not bureaucrats, in charge of education. We need to let patients be in charge of their own health care, not allow it to be HMO bureaucrats or government bureaucrats. That's why I want young people to be able to control their own retirement so that it's not decided in Washington. Once you return power to the people, and there's less money in Washington and less power in Washington, there's less susceptibility to corruption.
Republicans get tagged as the party of older America.
Yeah.
What are you going to do in 2006 to change that image and to convince 18 to 30-year-olds that Republicans and their candidates for elected office really want young people as a big part of our democracy?
Well, we're going to reach out and talk about our ideas. You know, if you think about it, if our parents' generation was raised on the radio, then your generation, and close to my generation, was raised on the internet. We're a generation that's used to making decisions for ourselves and choices for ourselves, and we don't want a bunch of folks telling us what to do. So we will reach out to people and we'll say, we're the party that says you and your family get to decide where you go to school, not a bureaucrat. And we're the party that says you, as the patient and your doctor, get to decide your health care, not some bureaucrat at the HMO or bureaucrat in the government, which is why we're for health savings accounts. We believe young people are smart enough to make decisions about their retirement with a personal retirement account. Government says, the other side says one size fits all, let's let the government decide this. We don't have to reform and update the Social Security system. On a whole lot of issues of the day, we believe power to the people, whether it's tax relief, education reform, or health care reform, and they say we're going to take your power away and give it to the government. I don't think folks that are younger, and a lot of folks that are older, think that a Washington bureaucrat understands their lives better than they do, and so I say power to the people as the way to reach out to young people to the Republican Party.
Mr. Chairman, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Appreciate the opportunity to visit with you today, and look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks for what you do. You serve our country well, and it's great that you're doing this.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks
we
a lot.
appreciate you doing this
Thanks.
for us. From the Nowinski perspective, it's good to see that a leader of the Republican Party is willing to sit down and speak frankly with the greatest wrestling political correspondent of all time. It's a smart move, because I predict that the turnout for Americans under 30 in 2006 will be consistent with the turnout from the presidential election of 2004. Smackdown Your Vote and the more than 35 organizations that make up the Smackdown Your Vote network are committed to making that happen. But it's up to you to get off that couch and into the voting booth on Election Day in 2006. So thank you, and so long until the next installment of The Nowinski Perspective for Smackdown Your Vote.